Do you struggle painting scenes with a lot of green in them? A lot of trees, grasses, foliage? Do you know why that is? I think I might have some answers for you and some tips to help you fix it. Okay, let me show you something with my palette of pastels here. A lot of artists lay out their pastels in this way because it's easier to find colors and see how the colors relate to one another. But I want you to notice in my spread of pastels here, not only am I missing some gaps I've noticed in my palette, but I want you to see if you had to choose, where does the green begin and where does the green end? And I'll tell you, the camera here is going to adjust the colors a little bit, but in real life, the greens for me start around here and then they travel all the way over to around in here. And then on the far left, I've got my indigos, I've got my blues, and then over here I've got yellows, which is kind of a thin strip. I've got my oranges, I've got my reds, and then I've got my violets over here. But you can see just by looking at this spread of pastels here that the green extends pretty far. Now let me focus on two of the greens across this spread. And again, through the camera lens, these may not appear as green as they actually are. But I have this here, which is very much like a teal, a blue-green. Yes, it has a lot of blue in it. In real life, this is, I would consider a green. And then over here, let's just go maybe this far and grab this. This is definitely a warm green. That's very different. And this leads to some of the problem that we have with choosing colors in a predominantly green scene with a lot of trees and foliage, for example. Now, you might be thinking, Clint, there's just a wide spread of greens in your pastel layout there because you're really bad at sorting your pastels. But I want to show you this. So this is Photoshop. It's a software that I use quite a bit and is an industry standard in graphic design, of course. And if I slide over here to the color picker tool, what do we notice about this color gradient on the picker here? What do you notice specifically about the amount of space that each color takes up? We've got the red at the top, and of course the red switches over to the bottom here, so you have to take that with a grain of salt, but red is kind of small. You've got the violets there, you've got the blues, you've got the cyan, and then the green takes up quite a bit of space. And then you get to a little sliver of yellow, and then down to the orange red, and then the orange. But that green takes up more space on our color gradient here than the other colors do. It's not that green takes up more space on the color spectrum. It has just as much space in terms of wavelengths, mathematically, scientifically speaking, as any of the other colors. But the colors that we consider green, the colors that our brain perceives as green, has a wider band. Another reason this happens is because our eyes are physiologically suited to pick up greens a little bit better. And so we can perceive green in some of the other color mixes, some of the other colors, and that kind of tricks our brain into perceiving that that's the dominant color in that mix, that the green is more dominant than, say, the blue or the yellow, depending on how it's mixed. Hey, real quick, I want to cut in here and tell you about our Pastel Workshop Mentorship community. It's an awesome space where we have a lot of pastelists who are on this journey together, giving feedback, critiquing, encouraging one another, giving some inspiration. It's a great place, great community. It's over on a platform called School, S-K-O-O-L. So school.com/pastel-workshop. If you head on over there, you can find that community. It's free to join. And while you're there, if you decide you want to upgrade, we have a premium tier available as well, and you'll get access to full-length courses about color harmony for pastelists, mark making, developing an intentional daily creativity habit. And so if you head on over there, you can join the free community, but also check out those courses available if you upgrade. All right, let's get back to the video. So I've started this scene. It has a lot of green in it. Obviously, I've got a triad scheme going on here with this kind of blue-green up here and a mauve in the water. And then I have these greens all around in this foliage and the grasses. And it's very tempting to choose one temperature of green, one shade of green, and use it across this whole scene. And if you look at the reference photo here, a lot of the greens are very similar, but I need to pay really close attention because although they are similar to my eye, I can exaggerate the differences and create a more interesting painting. And this is actually more real to life. In a real scene, not looking at a photograph, but if we're there in real life, the variation is more intense because our eyes can see better than the camera. So one of the things I'm going to keep in mind is that the greenery that's closer to me is going to be warmer and a little bit bolder in color, generally speaking. And the greenery that's far away from me, like these far trees that I'll put in here, is going to be a little bit cooler, a little more towards the blue side of green. So I've got some yellowish greens up here, that's pretty obvious. Then I'll have some bluish greens off in the distance. And then our trees, vertical trees, are very dark. Vertical foliage is typically very dark because the light's coming down from above and we're kind of looking up at it, and it casts a shadow amongst all that foliage. So we have a dark over here, and I've actually put kind of a really dark purplish kind of color as the underpainting for the shadow here to give me even more variation, and same thing over here. So I'm going to choose some greens and start to lay out and pick what greens I want to use. And some of these are going to be exaggerated for now, and I might tone them back later, but I want to tell myself in my mind as I'm painting this piece that there needs to be some variation. So this close greens in this grass here, I've chosen this really strong kind of a lime green color. So I'm just gonna scumble some of that in. Just give me an idea of these close grasses. And even here, so the real close grasses, strong, bold, lime green color, but as I shift around this bank, I can use a little bit of this, but it's getting a little bit farther away from me, and I want to cool this off and probably darken it a little bit. And by cool that off, I mean I want to shift to something that's a little bit more towards blue. So kind of a yellow-green. This is still pretty warm, but it's shifting more towards the blue side and a little bit darker. So I can start layering some of that in. And if I were to pull up a color wheel, color scale, these would be pretty far apart around the wheel, because this is pretty yellow. There's a lot of yellow in this. There's a little bit more, less yellow, more blue in this one. So these are pretty far apart, but we call these both green. And so that's part of our trouble we're trying to resolve here. So I've got this cooler green that shifts back here. Maybe I could put a little bit of that up here. And then I want some on the other side. But I'm trying to pay attention to using this color where the distance is equal. So this bush is a little closer to us than this shoreline over here. So I'm going to use a little bit of it, but I'm not going to use much because I need to cool that off as it gets in the distance, as I get into that atmosphere. I can use a little bit under here. All right, now I need to shift and find a decent shade of green to use for these bushes here and these here. This is willow here, and willows tend to have kind of a sagier, lighter green. This is pretty warm, but I'm going to start with this kind of underneath and just scumble a little bit that on, and then some up here as well. Again, because these bushes are a little closer to me, especially this one here. So I want to pull that closer with a little bit stronger color, a little bit warmer color. Now I'm going to put a mark here, and you can see how this is similar to the two colors I've used so far. And on the camera, it's probably not going to play it up as much as in real life, but this is about the same value as that cool green we were using over here. But this is a little bit warmer. This is a little more towards yellow. So I can use that warmer, yellower green close to me, and then I can fade to the cooler green as I get farther away from me. And then now I'm going to think about either an even cooler green for these willows or a grayer green. sometimes grayer greens feel cooler. So I'm going to start with this. This is shifting even more towards blue. So here, let me give you an idea how far we've traveled so far. This I would consider a green. This I would consider kind of in the middle. It's a kind of a true green. And this is tending towards blue, but it's still got quite a bit of green in it. And so we've traveled from this very yellowish green to this very bluish green, pretty far across the spectrum around the circle, but still all greens. So hopefully you can see some of the trouble that we have when we just say, I need a green. In our mind, when we're trying to choose a green, it can be challenging if we don't break them up as much as we do other colors. If I say I'm going to choose a red or an orange, those two colors are about the same distance apart from each other as what we consider green. If I say I'm going to choose a red or an orange, those two colors, a red and an orange, are about as far apart from each other as maybe these two greens right here. At least they're closer to each other than this spread, and we would consider all of this green. Now, one more trick that you can use in a green scene is that you shouldn't always use green. So these grasses down here, there's definitely some yellow in that grass. And I could be tempted to just say, oh, that's all green. But if I put a little bit of pop of yellow in there, that's gonna give me a little bit of variation there. Just barely put some up here. Maybe some of these leaves are kind of dying off a little bit. Just a few of them at the edges. So a little bit of yellow there. And then the same thing in my darks. I need to think about a kind of a brown or green or a yellow or green to use in some of these dark areas, especially closer to me. So this is maybe a green, might be considered a very dark yellow, which is a color that we struggle to identify because dark yellow just looks like kind of like a dark green. But I can use that, maybe considered a brown in this foliage up here, and that will bring that foliage closer to me up in those darks. And then I can echo that some down in here as well, just to give me a little more depth in my color. And then if I really want to exaggerate, I can go with a really blue-green like this and do some of this far foliage with that. And you can see the difference if I make a mark here. You can see how that looks really blue, but still in what we consider a green range. And then that looks really brown, but again, still in the green range. I can use this and push some of these distant trees even farther away from me. But one big advantage of laying out my pastels like this by color and value is that at least a little bit I can begin to get rid of those preconceived notions, those preconceived ideas, definitions of what the names of these colors are, and I can begin to see their relationship to one another, which is more valuable and more helpful. If I go to pick a green, then I might just reach here where they're obviously green. You know, that Kelly green, that Irish green, I might reach here, but that's probably not the green that I need most of the time. It might be something that's more towards the yellow or orange, might be something that's more blue, but seeing the relationships and thinking about the relationships and how they relate to one another is more important than coming up with the right name. So you've seen a little bit of the solution in action. If we want to paint a scene with a lot of greens, first of all, we have to understand that the spread of greens along the spectrum that we perceive as green, that we call green, is very wide. And so it's going to make it easier on us if we break that down a little bit smaller, break down our green swath into smaller sections. And we can do that in a couple ways. Now, wet media painters, oil painters, acrylic, watercolor, gouache, they kind of have a leg up on us pastel painters because when they buy their paints, there are consistent naming conventions about the colors and pigments that they're buying. So when they buy a phthalo green or a viridian green, they understand that there's a difference between those greens. We can kind of latch onto that idea when it comes to pastel painting, and we can either, number one, name them ourselves, come up with your own names for the different variations in color. Obviously on one end, you have your sea foams and your aquas and your kind of turquoises. And on the other end, you have your yellow greens, like your lemon lime or something like that. You can come up with your own names and play those over in your head when you're selecting your colors. So that's one way to approach it. Now, pastel manufacturers are not consistent with their naming conventions, and they don't need to be, like paint manufacturers do. But if you have worked with wet media before and you do have those names in your mind, like the yellow ochres and the burnt siennas and all of those, then you can definitely use those names in choosing your pastel colors. But if you don't have that experience, you can come up with your own names. But another way to approach this is to think more along the spectrum of greens. Am I more towards blue, or am I more towards yellow, or am I somewhere in between? And just think in your head as you're choosing your colors. I need something that's more yellow. I need a green, but I need it more yellow. I need a green, but I need it more blue. And you can make those selections if you lay out your pastels, as I showed you earlier, in your box, in your tray. You can choose the right colors a little bit easier in relation to one another. So you choose your green, not because it's green, but because it has the right amount of yellow, the right amount of blue in it. Now, one more tip that has helped me to more accurately select the right green with less effort is the greens are almost always warmer than I think that they should be. In other words, they're more towards yellow or orange than they are blue in most cases. If I'm talking about trees, grasses, foliage, especially foliage that's closer to me in the scene, I want to reach for a more yellow green or a more brown green, orangey green, than I do the blues and the greens in that end. Now, those bluish greens are great for distance and for certain lighting and scenes like that, but for the most part, I'm gonna reach for a warmer green first when I start to paint a tree or some grasses or some foliage. So try to put this together in your next painting session. When you need a green in your scene, don't think green anymore. Try to think in terms of either names. I need an aqua, I need a sea foam, I need a lime green, or just think in terms of relationship. I need a yellow green, or I need a blue green, or something in between. All right, now go paint those green scenes, go make something.